Distinguished guests, we are now ready for our very first panel of NESA 2026, and this panel is focused on the question of global leadership perspectives on financing Africa's nuclear energy future. And of course, the key question that we're wanting to ask here is how do we transform ambition into bankable, investable reality? What we do know and what we've heard from our heads of states and leaders of international organizations is that Africa's energy future will require unprecedented levels of capital mobilization. We've heard that it will require public-private collaboration and certainly a revived and reimagined approach to risk mitigation and long-term financial partnerships. This next dialogue brings together global leaders from the nuclear sector, development finance institutions, and international organizations to discuss how Africa can unlock these financing pathways. Moderating this session, won't you please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Daniel Poneman, the Chair for Nuclear Energy Policy at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. Let's give Mr. Poneman a big round of applause, please. Yes. And as Mr. Poneman comes up, I'm going to also welcome his distinguished panelists who will be joining him in a short while. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Sama Bilbao Leon, the Director General of the World Nuclear Association. Thank you, Madam. Please help me welcome Mr. William D. Magwood, the fourth, which is the Director General of the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency. Thank you, sir, for being here. Ambassador Sylvie Berman, thank you, Ambassador, for being here, who is the Ambassador of France and the President of the World Nuclear Exhibition. And we also have with us the President of the West African Development Bank, and that is Sergi Ecuyer. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. And certainly, last but not least, is the Acting Director General of the East African Development Bank, and that is Mr. Bernard Paul Mono. I think we have everyone on stage. As we get settled, might I ask you to settle them in with a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. To my technical team, I'm going to kindly please request if we could have some handheld microphones quickly made available to the participants. They are coming out. Thank you very much. I'm also going to remind everyone that we do have simultaneous interpretation available for you. Again, a quick reminder of the channels there, that on English is channel 1, and that on channel 2 is French, and Kiswahili will be on channel 3. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Poneman in a short while. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, good morning, everyone. Try that again. Good morning, everyone. All right, thank you. Well, I want to say what an honor it is to be here back in Kigali, and what an extraordinary morning we've already had with their excellencies, the presidents of so many countries here. I want to extend a special thanks and congratulations to Dr. Lassina Zerbo, Chairman of the Rwanda Atomic Energy Board, for his extraordinary leadership, and obviously to Director General Rafael Grossi of the IAEA, who gave very important remarks and handed over a very important document to President Kagame. So I'm joined here by eminent experts, and I think if there is one watchword that has already made its way to the stage and through the audience, it is time to move from talk to action. And I cannot help but reflect, I served in government a long time ago, and I visited Africa a lot between 2009 and 2014, and we had many interesting conversations, but that is what they were conversations. And we've now seen in recent years that we've got headwinds. We've got headwinds that we've overcome, and we've got tailwinds that have become much more dominant. And I think a critical moment that we experienced that Rafael Grossi described a few minutes ago was when the World Bank abandoned many, many years of ill-considered, frankly, opposition to nuclear energy and through very extensive negotiations with Rafael Grossi and others, has now opened the door, and we are going to be well representing the multilateral development banks here on this panel. But what I want to do, since we have this extraordinary moment, is just pause for a moment and talk about the context. The focus we've already seen on the screen has been on finance, and the finance as a pacing factor. But I think we have to think about finance in a broader context. There's really, I think, of 3 C's that are essential to turn nuclear energy from a vision to a reality. 1 C is customers. We need customers. And if anything was clear on the video screens earlier this morning, is that we have a huge bow wave of demand coming. Africa is the only continent that will have a larger share of the global population in 2050 than it does today. You heard the presidents talk about the increasing demand in each of their countries. So the customers are going to be there. We're going to have data centers. We have half of Africa that still needs power. The second thing we need is capability. And again, you heard from Rafael Grossi and others this morning, the need for capacitation, the need for training, and we're delighted to have so many young people here to help us get to that future where we have the training that will allow sovereignty and energy to become not just a vision, a reality. And the third pacing factor, the 3rd C, is in fact capital. And my humble supposition is that if we have the customers and we have the capability, the capital will be available. And so what better panel could I ask for to help us understand how this is going to work than the panel we have before us? And I'm going to start right here to my left with my dear friend and colleague, Sama Bilbao-Leon. I'm not going to introduce all the panelists because they've already been introduced and they're in your programs. But Sama is obviously the president of the World Nuclear Association. So Sama, let me begin with you. We were last together in Seattle talking about these advanced reactors. What do you see out there? You sit above this organization. You are all over the world. Where are the opportunities? How should we be thinking about this extraordinary moment in the future of nuclear and turning that vision into a reality?
Well, thank you, Dan, and good morning, everybody. It is truly, truly an honor to be back here in Kigali for the 2nd NESA conference. You know, as we were just hearing, since last year, there's been quite a lot of work that has taken place in Rwanda in particular. So we've been, well, incredibly impressed with the visionary leadership that has been shown by President Kagame and, of course, by Dr. Serbo and the entire team here in Rwanda. And we were actually, last year at COP30, we were very happy to welcome Rwanda as one of the 38 countries that have now joined the huge, ambitious coalition for triple global nuclear capacity by 2050. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to see that Rwanda and many other African countries is not just talking, we are doing things. So what is happening at a global level? I think that perhaps for the first time in quite a long time, I think that everybody in the world recognizes, well, what it's like not to have energy. So we are in the middle of the largest energy crisis that we have seen in many decades, some say ever. So we are bringing a new pragmatism, a new realism to how we think about energy in general. And that has, for the last few years, but certainly the last couple, has provided lots of visibility to nuclear energy. First of all, for the existing fleet. So we are seeing how every country that currently has nuclear energy is doing what it takes to maintain that fleet for as long as possible. Also, we are making major investments in long-term operation, in upgrades, and we are even bringing back units that have been prematurely shut down. And we are seeing this in all continents, including in Africa, of course. So we are seeing how just recently in South Africa, we extended the life of the 2 existing units for 20 more years. But clearly, that's not going to be enough. So this is the second part of the story. We are seeing everywhere in the world, in all continents, how this need for abundant, affordable, 24/7 energy is clear to most decision makers, most policy makers. And in that context, nuclear energy is becoming a key piece of that puzzle. So many countries in Africa and elsewhere have been working, and DG Grossi already presented this, on how to develop the infrastructure to make sure that we are ready to embrace nuclear energy. So whether it is putting in place the legal infrastructure, regulatory infrastructure, workforce, and now we are going to talk about financing. So on our side, World Nuclear Association, we've been doing a lot of work for the last 5 years to bridge the divide between the finance community and the nuclear community. And we've been working together with some of the colleagues that are here on the stage. So what we really are trying to make sure is like finance institutions start looking at nuclear as a special type of asset. We want to look at nuclear energy as another form of national sovereign infrastructure. And and this is very much aligned to what we were seeing is energy independence, is energy security, is the ability to meet sustainability and climate goals, but very importantly, making sure that we provide the socioeconomic development, the quality of life, the opportunities that we were seeing in those videos that will require abundant and affordable 24/7 energy. And maybe the last thing that I will say that I think is unique to Africa is it goes beyond building new nuclear power plants. When we are looking at Africa, Africa is rich in resources, including uranium, including many other important natural resources. So we are working with African countries to make sure that this development goes through the entire value chain for nuclear, starting from mining, obviously, yes, building nuclear power plants, but also helping develop the supply chain, the capabilities within Africa to be full members, full participants of the global nuclear family.
Excellent. So let's talk about becoming full members. We already heard about the milestones approach this morning, which IAEA is doing at the Nuclear Energy Agency, where Bill Magwood is the Director General. They've had a roadmaps program going for a number of years. I've had the privilege to participate, where you're actually helping countries go step by step. Bill, tell us, what is the roadmap to the deployment? You've heard a lot of interest already this morning in small and micro reactors, specifically in Africa, and what should be the role of the different, both public and private institutions in making that happen?
Thank you, Dan, and good morning to all of you. Or is it now good afternoon? It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first trip to Rwanda, my first time in Kigali, and it's been a tremendous pleasure to be here. I hope to have the opportunity to visit again in the future. Obviously, the reason I have not been here before is because my agency, the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, is a platform for cooperation among the highly developed nuclear countries, the countries with the deepest experience in nuclear technology. As a result of that, we have not had a lot of engagement with countries in the global south. That's changing, and it's changing for a very particular reason. As Dan pointed out, we have been working with our members to roadmap the path back to a very vibrant nuclear economy around the world. And our members have returned to nuclear energy as a key part of meeting the future energy security and environmental goals that they have set for themselves. But they also recognize that because they have not built nuclear plants for a long time, that they are facing many important challenges. And when we brought ministers and CEOs and the financial community together for these road mapping ministerial discussions that we hold every year, we find that they highlight three issues. They talk about the need to build human capacity all over the world. So when you hear that conversation in Africa, that is not unique to Africa, it's true everywhere. They need to build global supply chains to make sure that when people do want to build a nuclear facility, that the parts and components can be delivered with the quality and the schedule necessary to support deployment. But the most important issue that our member countries highlighted was how to finance this new generation of nuclear construction. The world has changed a lot since the 70s and 80s when we were building large numbers of nuclear power plants. And the cost that we see in many projects today are quite frankly frightening. So how to finance this new nuclear renaissance is really a key issue. And as we evaluate this, it has become completely clear to us that the conversation that you are having in your countries across Africa and the discussion that's taking place within OECD countries is almost exactly the same conversation. There's very, very little difference. So that's why we've launched something we call the Common Journey Initiative, recognizing that this is an opportunity to bring Africa into the conversation just as our countries are coming back into this nuclear exploration. And in doing so, it's very important to point out that for Africa in particular, nuclear is not just about electricity. We've heard a lot about the need for electricity. I am one of the biggest advocates in the world for having more electricity, as much as we possibly can have. But for Africa, it's much more than that. It's a development opportunity that is going to be completely unique. It is an opportunity to build skills across a wide range of disciplines. It's an opportunity to build small and medium-sized businesses. It's an opportunity to have all boats rise to meet the quality standards and the behaviors that are endemic in the nuclear sector. All parts of the economy and the country will benefit from deploying nuclear technology, not just a narrow segment. So, to answer the question about financing, I think that as you consider this, there are three very important principles that I would like to leave with you today that come from an understanding about where things are and where things need to go. And the first and most important thing is that if you're going to be successful in financing, you have to have clear, purposed leadership that will enable execution to take place. Execution, execution, execution. And if the global financial community doesn't believe that you're prepared to execute, they will not want to invest. It's going to be very, very simple. And that means that your estimates for cost, for schedule, the approaches that you're taking have to be realistic. And not just realistic in your own national context, but realistic on an international basis. People in Stockholm and Washington have to believe your project will work. And if they don't, the investment will not be there. Secondly, we have also concluded that for all of our countries, all countries working in nuclear, we're going to have to be much more sophisticated on how we allocate risk in financing. Financing will not be a simple matter for most countries. It will require a much more sophisticated risk allocation approach where different aspects of projects are financed by different segments. And governments will have to take some of that burden, but also the private sector will have to take some of that burden in different parts of the private sector. We have to be smart about this, otherwise it will be very, very difficult to make progress. The World Bank, for example, we've talked a lot about today, and we've worked very closely with the World Bank over the last year or so as they've moved into this new direction. It's very clear to me that the World Bank will not be financing large nuclear projects all by itself. It's just simply not going to happen. What will happen is that the World Bank will look at very specific roles in projects. So figure out for your project, where can the World Bank help? Where can it play a role in showing that the project is viable, then attract other investors? It's very complicated, but it's very important. The final point I would make, and President Kagame really brought a smile to my face when he said this, cooperation in Africa will be essential. If every country goes alone, your chances of success go down. The more you cooperate, the more your chances of success go up. And I have to admit, even in our countries, the cooperation is not as strong as it should be. People have a tendency to look inward more than they should. But the opportunity with this new nuclear renaissance exists for countries to band together, to develop together, and to create markets for common products and common services. If they do this, the chances of success are much, much higher, and the ease of financing goes up. So I would those are the 3 points I would leave you with. We are interested in working with many countries that are moving forward in this direction. We are not equipped to work with everybody, but we are going to be very selective, and for countries that are making the right progress, the NEA will be there to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. As we think about this, and we are going to get to our regional development bank leaders here in a moment, let's not forget other sources of capital as well. I want to highlight the statement made by Dr. Zerbo this morning Now we have an official announcement out of Singapore that philanthropy is stepping up to the plate. They also have, when Bill, you're talking about governments taking a certain kind of risk, philanthropies are built to take a certain kind of long-range risk to help get a critically important humanitarian requirement fulfilled at a time when perhaps private capital markets are not ready to do so. So I think we should give a round of applause to the folks in Singapore and the folks here in Kigali who helped that happen. And I would be remiss if I did not mention both Rockefeller Foundation and Temasek Trust, among others, are stepping up to the plate, and I think we'll be hearing more from them in a day or so. So we've heard a lot about the banks, so we're going to come last to France because it's a great success story. Let's turn, Serge, perhaps to you. So you've been hearing all those conversations. I know the president asked you to come back after your distinguished international financial career to lead the effort that you now lead as the head of the West African Development Bank. How are you thinking about all that you're hearing here? Where are you in the underwriting process? What do you need to see? And your bank members, what will they need to see to begin to invest capital in nuclear?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today, this afternoon. First of all, let's discuss the landscape. I think that when it comes to nuclear energy, we'll have to repeat day after day the same thing, considering that repetition is the beginning of pedagogy. We'll have to be very, very clear giving the explanation. Because when it comes to nuclear energy, all the fears, wisdoms, frights and everything usually rises. So we have to be very, very clear about it. So the landscape basically, it's again, you have more than 686 million people in Africa that have no access to any source of energy. So the question is less the source, the question is the access, regardless of the source. So let's discuss the access first, the source afterwards. Then in Africa, and more specifically in our sub-region, we will be as populated as the US in a generation time. As populated as the US in a generation time. And we have to face this reality. The other reality is that we have a demand of we have a demand of 11%, growing demand of 11% energy on a yearly basis, where the supply only sits at 4%. So we do have, yes, we do have a structural gap here. So we have to face this reality. Now, as a banker at the helm of the West African Development Bank, we're facing this reality today. Yes, we are funding the fossil fuel, we're funding thermal, we're funding renewable, of course. We're funding solar on top of the roof of our houses, institutions, whatsoever. And we can do both, actually. We can fund the renewable energy and looking forward to fund the nuclear energy. So there's no contradiction here. Now, how can we fund it? We basically have two traditional models. The first model being, we rely 100% on the government, on the sovereign, period. But we know that it just doesn't work. When you look at the debt to GDPs of most of our country, getting to ceilings, to thresholds where it's being complicated. This is the first element. The second one is if we were to go only through PPPs, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work because of the tariff. We have, and governments, we have to subsidize. So the classical PPP financing, whereby you have a construction period, then succeeding a concessional period, it wouldn't work. So we need to think differently. We need to think out of the box. We need to think differently. And the way we've been thinking here would be based on a few elements. The first one is long-term funding. patient capital. Because when it comes to energy, nuclear energy, the forecast is more like 30, 40, 60 years maturity. So it's long-term funding. Long-term funding means patient's capital. This is one. The second thing is we need to make sure that we work on creditworthy of the off-takers. We need to work on creditworthy off-taker structure. Because at the end of the day, we know that the future of the financing, and this is my credo, it's capital market, private sector, private investors, clearly not governments. And we no longer can rely on, I would say, classical donation, classical subsidies from any countries, because we are in a phase where we do face the donors, international donors fatigue. The taxpayers are no longer comfortable with funding outside their closest region. So we need to find ways to access the private sector, capital market, the private sector. And we know that the pockets are profound and deep enough to fund what is needed here, considering again that nuclear energy industry is capital intensive. Capital intensive. So considering that, we could think about structuring transactions by which naturally we would have the commitment of government, of the sovereign, long-term commitment. Then relying on DFIs. DFIs, and I'm really happy that my friend AJ Banga has opened the door to nuclear energy financing. Because DFI would come with concessional funding, patient's capital. This is one. The second thing is we do also need to attract ECAs, because the ECAs would be the ECAs of those who monitor the technology, and the ECAs of all countries will be very happy to fund this kind of transaction. And the third layer of the structure, which would be called technically the senior debt. The senior debt would be invested by private sector, but private investors. But a private investor would be very comfortable considering that, yes, they would have as an anchor investor the World Bank, BOAD, the African Development Bank, and all other banks, all other DFIs. We are anchor investors, and therefore they will be attracted by this kind of transaction. So I would say that from a technical standpoint, yes, we have possibility. That will be all for me at this point.
Let me just follow up on one aspect. You talk about, it's very true, patient capital. And I can remember when gas plants were being built with great rapidity, you know, you don't have to worry about the extended time frames that you do, either in building nuclear, but on the other end, you don't have the extended life at the other end. So as a development bank, if I could get specific, because we're trying to get some answers done here, what is the tenor of debt that you could contemplate to support a nuclear project? And could you talk about equity, and would you be willing to co-invest equity alongside private investors?
Yeah, we've been fighting a lot so as to strengthen our capital structure, starting with the equity. So at the West African Development Bank, for example, we have doubled our tier one, our equity. We're now more than $3.5 billion. Okay, pure equity tier one. So based on this, yes, we can tap the senior debt, we can tap the debt market, long-term debt market. For example, we have a few months back, we have tapped the debt market for €1 billion, 15 years. We can do that. We currently working, I mean, we have closed 2 transactions last year, 30 years maturity for non-callability of 5 years, which literally means that we could go up to 30 years. But we could also, as the African Development Bank has done, they went on a perpetual transaction with a non-callability of 10 years, all right? So we have, with, you know, having enhanced strengthen our capital structure, we could tap the market for long-term transaction. Long-term maturity is what we're looking for, and you are very comfortable structuring long-term transaction because our business is long-term. We're long-term investors.
Okay, so Bernard.
Sorry, one thing I would like to add, sorry to interrupt, one thing I would like to add, because I would be frustrated not to have mentioned it, is the question not only of the commitment of governments, but also the legal and regulatory framework. We need to make sure that we match with the highest standards. We need to set up an independent nuclear authority monitoring the whole system. So these are, for me, the absolute stakeholders we would need to be comfortable enough to fund nuclear projects.
Okay, so this is great, and I think it's apt that you're sitting next to your colleague from East Africa, Bernard Mono, of the East African Development Bank. So build on what we've just heard from Serge, and if you don't mind, I think there are a number of people out there, and maybe even up here, who don't understand exactly the role of the regional development banks vis-a-vis the World Bank. So obviously, it was a great initiative and sort of opened the door when Aji Banga agreed to remove the prohibition against nuclear investment, but that's not the same thing as stroking a check, right? So how do you think about this? What are you looking at in the nuclear space? And do also say a word about the regional integration that Bill Magwood raised as one of the important factors. Will you be able to co-invest, for example, with the West African Development Bank? Are you able to share some of the same diligence, or do you have to run your own process? Help us understand that, please.
Thank you for having me. East African Development Bank is owned by the 4 member states of the East Africa community, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, and we're yet to admit other members of the community. So that's our area of operation. So in terms of the mandate, we have similar mandate. The only thing is my colleague operates in the West Africa, we operate in East Africa, but the mandate is the same, financing long-term projects and for development. So the cooperation that we could do is knowledge sharing and capacity building, but in terms of co-financing, unless his operation allows him to, his mandate allows him to operate in East Africa, we'll welcome him. But my mandate does not allow me to operate in West Africa. As you're saying, yes, there is that lifting of the restriction to just have a look at nuclear energy projects. And it's an important milestone. And for us, it's an opportunity to start demystifying nuclear energy. Because it's this thing, when you are mentioning nuclear energy, everyone freaks out. And with that lifting, we can start conversation. We are able to underwrite a transaction now. I would say no. We still need to do a bit of learning, capacity building, and involvement in forums like this is very important. I'll tell you, I've learned about nuclear energy more than I've ever done in my life in preparation for this summit. And I'm looking forward to learning more. Once I go back, definitely I will not be the same. My team will not be the same. So we're able to look at some of the things that involve the nuclear energy projects. But at the moment, there are things that we still do and can continue doing. For example, we've been financing the transmission lines in our member countries. We've worked with Kenya Power in Kenya, Tanzania Electric Company, TANESCO in Tanzania, and others. We are doing one in Uganda now, the transmission line. And I believe, I mean, the transmission line is transmission line. There are a few tweaks that need to be done, but if there's generation from nuclear energy, it will still need to be transmitted to go to the customers that my colleague mentioned about. And the rest is the same. I think, as you said, capital is available, but do we have projects? I think that the preparation of the project that everyone can be able to look at and say, okay, fine, the execution side is taken care of, regulatory side is taken care of, and I mean, I can identify the risks, I can assign them, allocate them appropriately, price them, and be able to set the mitigant to allow me to participate in that project. So it's a good conversation, and soon, I believe, we'll be able to underwrite some of those projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we can all take inspiration from the fact that this actually has been done successfully in the past, and perhaps no more successfully than in France. And by the way, among the distinguishing features of France, number one, they had a presidential decision in 1974, tout nucléaire, Georges Pompidou, and then they managed to get 80% of the electricity from nuclear, but also, in contrast to the United States, they had a much more homogeneous system and approach, to go to Bill Magwood's point. What, Sylvie, would you tell, and as president of the World Nuclear Exhibition, what would you tell our audience here, the lessons that they can take from the success of the French experience and how to apply those here in Africa?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I think the most important thing, in fact, is that it was a strategic national project. It was after the first oil crisis, and it was about sovereignty and independence. And also, everybody has mentioned that it is a long-term investment, and obviously it has to be a long-term policy. You can't change when you change your government, and so we need predictability, and investors, of course, need predictability. So for 30 years, we built nuclear plants. Now it's 57. There's a new program now, or 6 plus 8. And what is required, of course, apart from this long-term, not only investment, but spirit, I think, and it has been mentioned also, it's regulation, which is a reliable, independent regulation. You need the skills, of course, talents, and it has to start at the same time that you decide to build a new nuclear plant. For instance, in France, now we have 250,000 people involved in nuclear. We have 650 companies. They are not 100% nuclear, but they work in nuclear. So this is an incredible and very talented supply chain, which is necessary as well. And so I think all that has been implemented in France can be implemented in Africa. There is a resolution, that's what we heard this morning from 3 heads of state, and that's the case of many others. It's a necessity for you because, well, as it has been said, the solar and wind is not permanent, as is nuclear energy. So, and you need a strong regulation, of course, and France is ready to cooperate. We are present with the largest booth, in fact, at this NESA exhibition, and we will sign an agreement with NESA and GIFEN, which is the Association of Nuclear Industries, and as I said, it is more than 650 companies, and to provide not only support, but to organize cooperation between African countries and France. And for that purpose, as the president of the World Nuclear Exhibition, which is the largest civil nuclear exhibition in the world, we would like to have a strong African representation. Maybe, I don't know, African pavilion or African corner. It has to be discussed. It will be discussed with NESA, of course, and in particular with Lassina Zerbo, who organized the first delegation last year. But as I've seen on the walls downstairs in the exhibition hall, the global workforce is aging, but not African youth. So there's a lot of potential, and so you will be welcome. Everything will be discussed, finance, of course. We will discuss the SMRs. which is very important for the future, and which is really a good solution also for most African countries. We will discuss fusion, we will discuss a lot of other things, and including innovation. There will be innovation awards, and last year we had 36,000 visitors.
Wow.
With 1,000 exhibitors, and what the companies told me afterwards, it's an incredible opportunity to meet as many people as you would in 6 months or 1 year. So we have 18 nationalities represented. We had 24 national pavilions, so of course African countries will be most welcome in the next WNE, which will take place in December 2027.
Something to look forward to for all of us. Okay, it's gone fast, but we're running out of time here. So I'm going to do a lightning round here, and I'm going to put a challenge to our panelists. So between last year and this year, we had this tectonic shift at the World Bank of allowing finance. I'd like to ask each of our panelists in less, like 45 seconds, if there were one concrete accomplishment to announce at NESA 2027 in Togo for Africa, what would it be? And we'll go in the same order. Sama?
Well, I would like to see an actual plan laid out. So, and let me just say, and I think that we heard this from Sergio and Bernard. So we really need to, these banks know very well how to manage large infrastructure projects. There is very different tier structures that we can put together. We can, using multilateral development banks, export credit agencies, etc., to actually put some of the risk out in these first-of-a-kind, first-in-country projects. So I would like to see something like that. So, I mean, so whether it's Rwanda or some other country in Africa where we have an actual project where a financial structure has been laid out to launch the construction of that particular unit.
A financed project. And you can do more than one person on one idea if you like it. But Bill, you're up.
Well, as I mentioned, I think that nothing would be more important to really reduce the risk and to increase the chances for success than having countries make substantive agreements to work together, to build supply chains together, to regulate together. That's a very important one. That's a big deal. It's a leadership level issue, but if you were able to achieve that, that would change the game. That's the one thing you could do in Africa that would just completely change the conversation. And I know it's a hard thing to do, but if you did it, it would make the big difference.
Excellent. Serge, we're going to come.
Well, for me, can't be country project. It is by definition either a continental or regional project. Here, the Republic of Togo being the seed, but the seed for our sub-region, YMU. I trust very much the cross-border production and distribution of any source of energy. Our population will rely very much.
Excellent. Bernard.
Yeah, as we'll continue with the distribution, there's the East Africa Power Pool. There are things that we are looking at doing in that area. But in particularly to nuclear energy, I'm looking forward to at least finance capacity building something, whether it's a project, especially what we're calling MMR, micro modular reactors, and we are interested. We'll see what the countries are doing, and if we're able to chip in something as part of project preparation, because it's also our learning journey, so that we see what's possible and what's not possible.
Okay. Sylvie, one deliverable in 1 year.
Yes. Well, time flies very quickly, in fact, from one laser to another, from 1 year to another year, because you mentioned the change of the World Bank, but it is the case also of the European Union. For the first time, the President of the Commission, during last summit in Paris, where President Kagame, with the was the guest of honor. She recognized the strategical mistake of renouncing to nuclear. So the world is changing, so time is for action now. And I think what would be good at the next NESA summit would be to have a concrete either roadmap or plan of action at the level of Africa.
Outstanding. Okay, so we've got, somebody's taking notes, and Lassina, at NESA 2027, we want to do a checklist on how we did on these 5 objectives. I think this has been an extraordinary panel. We've really begun the conversation of taking ambition and spirited, passionate commitment and turning it into concrete deliverables. That's what we need. Please join me in thanking this outstanding panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, and we can also give the moderator, Mr. Pornman, a big round of applause for an excellent moderation. Thank you very much. A very big thank you to yourself, Daniel, and your panelists. You're welcome to descend stage.